You could argue it's going to be Duke basketball's toughest ACC test yet this weekend when the Blue Devils travel to South Carolina to take on the Clemson Tigers. Let's dive into it.
You are Locked On Blue Devils, your daily podcast on the Duke Blue Devils. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everybody, and welcome into another episode of the Locked On Blue Devils podcast. My name is JJ Jackson. So excited to have you here with us today on Friday, February 7th, 2025, as Locked On Blue Devils is your one-stop shop where we discuss everything going on in the life of Duke athletics. If you have not done so already, please be sure to follow us on Twitter at @LO_Blue Devils. I'm there as well at _JJ_Jackson_. Be sure to subscribe and follow Locked On Blue Devils for free wherever it is that you get your podcast. Leave us a 5-star rating and written review on the Apple Podcast platform. And then you can also watch our show each and every day. Make sure that you subscribe to the Locked On Blue Devils YouTube channel to be a part of our growing community and so much more. On today's show, we're going to dive into this game coming up for Duke against Clemson. It's going to be a tough test for the Blue Devils taking on the Tigers as they look to improve on their 12-0 record in ACC play. Duke's got a 16-game winning streak, the longest in the nation, that they're looking to continue. A little bit later in the program, we'll have our weekend whip around where we'll take you around Duke athletics and give you updates on everything that you need to know going into the weekend. All that said, it's going to be a really fun and exciting episode of Locked On Blue Devils here today. We've been talking so much this week about the magnitude of this game, truthfully talking a little bit too much about it going into even the Syracuse game on Wednesday night. Who does that? When you've got a game on the schedule, you don't want to overlook the opponent, but everyone wanted to see what the game against Clemson on Saturday was going to look like for the Blue Devils. Turns out it was okay to look ahead a little bit as Duke was able to win by 29 points over Syracuse earlier in the week. And so now everyone wants to see this game play out as you've got Clemson, a team that right now is tied for second in the ACC with a 10-2 record in league play, 18-5 overall, and a team that has given Duke a couple of scares over the last few years. Head coach Jon Scheyer is 1-1 versus Brad Brownell, the Clemson head coach, and the Clemson Tigers. Brad Brownell, conversely, is 4-14 all-time versus Jon Scheyer and Coach K and the Duke Blue Devils. Now that Leonard Hamilton is set to step away at the end of this upcoming season, Florida State's head coach, as we talked about last night on the ACC squad, Brad Brownell is set to be the longest tenured ACC head coach. So he's knocked off Duke 4 times. He's going to look to do that here coming up tomorrow. Last year's game was a classic. The one year that Jon Scheyer has over Clemson so far in his career was at home inside Cameron Indoor. Joe Girard, if you recall, the longtime Syracuse guard, had transferred to Clemson. He's playing for them last season. Clemson ends up making a run all the way to the Elite Eight last season before being knocked off by Alabama. But in that game that Duke had against the Clemson Tigers, they won 72-71, and Duke won that game with 1 second left. Clemson was called for a foul, and Tyrese Proctor went to the free throw line, and he knocked down both free throws to give Duke that 1-point win. Massive victory last season for the Blue Devils. The only time that Jon Scheyer has coached in Little John Coliseum there on the road against Clemson, Duke ended up losing that game. So they're going to look to try and turn that around this time coming up tomorrow. As you look at Clemson on the season, currently they are number 26 in the AP poll. I'm well aware that it only goes to the top 25, but the voters are announced each and every week, and you can carry it out. So Clemson received the 26th most votes in the week. If you look at the net rankings for both of these teams, Duke is number 2 in the net rankings, which is a metric, of course, that the NCAA tournament has been looking at over the last few years. Clemson number 33. So this will be a quad 1 opportunity for both of these teams. Duke has not had very many quad 1 opportunities throughout the course of ACC play, and yet they're still so dominant. That's what's tough when you look at the conversation as who is the best team. Is it Duke or is it Auburn, who Duke won head-to-head on their home floor against? Well, Auburn is competing in the SEC, and there's a world in which the SEC could get 13, 14 teams in the tournament at the end of the year, which is just absurd because we're not seeing that level of play in the ACC, which is hurting Duke's kind of resume building opportunities. They're winning their games, But when you look at the strength of competition, it's not what some of those other teams are having. And again, that's not something that Duke can control, but it is what it is in so many ways. So Clemson's coming off a triple overtime loss versus Georgia Tech on their home floor. Talked about it throughout the course of the week, the kind of home stretch that Clemson has with 3 straight home games. Georgia Tech, Duke tomorrow, and then this upcoming Monday, they'll have a quick turnaround, and they're going to host the North Carolina Tar Heels. But they did not take care of business against Georgia Tech, as the Yellow Jackets have now handed both Clemson and Louisville their second ACC loss. So the Blue Devils, in essence, right now have a 2-game lead on the ACC. And if Duke finds a way to win tomorrow, they're going to have the tiebreaker over both Clemson and Louisville, and it's going to be incredibly difficult to find a world in which Duke has that top seed in the ACC tournament taken away from them. We want a full undefeated year in ACC play, but right now Duke is very much so still in the driver's seat to win the regular season championship. All-time, Duke leads this series 115-33. We're set to see the 149th meeting all-time between these two programs, but it's really not been close at all, as Duke has been pretty dominant in the series against these Clemson Tigers, who are led in scoring by Chase Hunter. He's averaging about 17 points per game. In 5 career games against Duke, though, that number drops down to just 10 points per game and 2.4 assists on the year. However, or assists in those games against Duke. However, when you look at Chase Hunter, he is an absolute threat from the outside. Many people believe he could be the guard on the first team All-ACC, given how well he's played so far this season, and I certainly agree with it. You look at his shooting numbers, he's shooting 43.5% from three-point range. That is first in the entire conference. That's one of the best clips in the entire country. Also, be on the lookout for Ian Shefflin, who's had some big-time battles against Duke over the years on the interior with 9.5 rebounds per game. He's been an absolute force on the inside. Those rebounds rank second in the entire conference. A very competitive player who's working for extra possessions. And if Clemson wants to win this basketball game, they know that they've got to keep Duke off the glass, as Duke is the second best ACC rebounding team. And you've got to limit Duke from getting those second chances with Cooper Flagg and Khaman Maluach on the interior for this Duke squad. With 10 wins in ACC play for Clemson, 9 of their 10 wins have been by 10-plus points. Only one of those wins has been by 20-plus points. I think that alone can kind of show you the difference in teams there in the ACC. That here you have Clemson, who's the second best team in the league right now, them in Louisville, and 9 of their 10 conference wins have been by double digits. That's just crazy. One of them has been by 20 points. In a moment, I'll tell you how absurd it is that Duke is as good as they are offensively, given the rest of the ACC. 5 losses on the year for Clemson. They lost, as we said earlier in this week, by 3 against Georgia Tech in triple overtime. They've also lost overtime games against Memphis on their home floor, and then they went to South Carolina, the in-state rivalry, taking on the Gamecocks in Columbia, and lost that game in overtime. Head-to-head, Louisville knocked off Clemson by 10 points. That was a home game for the Cardinals. They beat Clemson there. And then Clemson also lost early in the season at Boise State. Strange non-conference game there for the Tigers. They went all the way to Idaho and lost to Boise State. So talking more about those wins for the Blue Devils, again, I just laid it out for Clemson. They're 9 of their 10 ACC wins being by double digits, one of them being by 20-plus points. Duke on the season has won all 12 ACC games. 10 of their 12 games have been won by double digits. However, 7 of their 12 ACC wins have been by 20-plus. Duke's not even in the same conversation as the rest of the ACC this season. They so far exceed it. Duke wins this season in ACC play. 11 points, 26, 23, 27, 29, 8-point win over Notre Dame, 35, 25, 7-point win at Wake Forest, 10 points, 17 points, 29 points. Those have been the margins for the Blue Devils in this one. Just absurd, the level of basketball that Duke's playing. Another thing to be on the lookout for in this Clemson game, the reunion with Christian Reeves, who we love, played 2 seasons with Duke, only appeared in 16 games for the Blue Devils, redshirted his first year, In 16 games, he averaged 1.6 points, 1.1 rebounds, 3.6 minutes. We talked about him the most in Countdown to Craziness each year because it felt like he had amazing performances in those games. Reeves is 7'2", went to Oak Hill, was high school teammates with Caleb Foster. This season for Clemson, he's playing more, only 5.4 minutes per game. He did have a season-high 7 rebounds earlier in the week against Georgia Tech. I do expect him to play against Duke, maybe not a whole lot, but it'd be cool to see him going up against a couple of his former teammates and, of course, the coaching staff that was with him all throughout last year. So excited to see this game play out. In just a moment, we're going to talk a little bit more about how dominant the year has been for Duke so far this season, what's at stake in this game, and so much more as Locked On Blue Devils will continue here in just a moment. Locked On Blue Devils here today is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. FanDuel is the absolute best this time of year, and Super Bowl 59 is here. One game, two teams, endless possibilities, and there's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. Whether it's predicting the first touchdown, calling the MVP, or even betting on the coin toss, FanDuel makes it easy to get in on the action. With live betting all game long, you can adjust your bets as the game unfolds and feel the thrill from kickoff to the final whistle. The live betting feature lets you stay involved no matter what happens on the field, and the app is super easy to navigate. Plus, knowing that you could place a $5 bet and potentially win $200 in bonus bets for the Super Bowl, that's just the icing on the cake. Download the app today and head to FanDuel.com to get started. Bet just $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Bet with FanDuel, an official sponsor of Super Bowl 59 and an official partner of Locked On Blue Devils. All right, let's keep this thing going. It's Locked On Blue Devils here today. I'm JJ Jackson. Be sure again to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Subscribe for free wherever it is that you get your podcasts as well, and leave us a 5-star rating and written review. We can give out some 5-star Friday shout-outs a little bit later in the show. It is Friday after all. If you want to be mentioned in future episodes, be sure to leave us a 5-star rating and written review. It's a 16-game winning streak for Duke basketball. The 16-game winning streak for the Blue Devils is the longest in the entire country. Auburn right behind them. But, of course, Duke had that head-to-head win once again over the Auburn Tigers. 16-game winning streak for the Blue Devils is the longest since the 2005-2006 season. That season's also noteworthy because that is the last time that Duke started 12-0 in ACC play like they currently are. That 05-06 team ended up going 14-0 to start ACC play, went all the way to the Sweet 16 as a 1 seed. Many people believed that was a Duke team capable of winning a national championship. I certainly was one of those folks. That was J.J. Redick's senior year. So we're seeing right now a lot of similarities between this Duke basketball team and that 05-06 team when you look at some of the numbers and the streaks that they've been having in ACC play so far this year. Duke this season, talking about the level of dominance, we just talked about their margins that they've had in ACC games so far this year. The Blue Devils are the only Division I team right now to be scoring over 80 points per game and allowing less than 60. It's 59.6 points per game that Duke has been giving up. But again, that in itself is like a 20-point margin with what Duke's averaging scoring-wise and what they're giving up on the defensive end of the floor. Truly able to take advantage of both sides of the floor this season. You look at the metrics, Duke also currently is the only team in the country right now that, according to KenPom, with those metrics, is top 5 in both offensive efficiency and defensive efficiency. Duke is 4th in the country in offensive efficiency and 2nd right now in defensive efficiency. This has happened 7 times before, or Duke is the 7th time that this has taken place. 4 times a team has finished the year top 5 in both offense and defensive efficiency. They've gone on to win the national championship. I'd obviously love for that to be the case for this Duke team this season, and I know that you everydayers would as well. We love Duke basketball that much. The other 2 times that a team was top 5 in both offensive and defensive efficiency was in 2015, the Kentucky team that was undefeated, felt like they were on a collision course with the national title game before they lost to Wisconsin in the Final Four, and then we know Duke knocks off Wisconsin in the title game. And then I know you're probably thinking, okay, who's the other team that's top 5 offensive and defensive efficiency throughout an entire season to not win the national championship? That was in 2021. Gonzaga went undefeated throughout the entire season, 31-0. As you remember, going into the national championship game, all they got to do is beat Baylor to be national champs, and Baylor won by 16. So Gonzaga in 2021, Kentucky in 2015 are the only 2 teams to finish the year top 5 in both offensive and defensive efficiency and not win the national championship. What's evident in this is that Duke does still have several games left on their schedule. Plenty of opportunity if Duke does not play well to not even finish top 5 in both of those metrics, but they're on their way thus far. And history tells us if you could continue to roll it out as a team that is one of the top 5 teams, both offensively and defensively, you're going to have a really good chance of winning the national championship, and that's exactly what this Duke team is trying to do. Kon Knueppel has been a really fun player to watch all season long for Duke. He's been one of my favorites. He's a guy that wasn't one of the most regarded recruits that we were talking about going into the year, and then all of a sudden in preseason, getting ready for the season, everyone's talking about, wow, this Kon Knueppel guy is incredible. He's probably going to start for this Duke team. Then you start seeing his name in mock drafts as a first-round option. Then the season finally gets here, and we understand why. He's a really good basketball player. Looking at what Kon has done this season, I found this note interesting. Duke is 16-0 this year when he makes 2 3-point shots in a game. That's it. Duke's top shooter from the outside, Kon Knueppel. If he makes 2 3-pointers, Duke is 16-0 on the season. Look at his numbers. He's averaging 2.3 makes per year on 6.1 attempts per game. He's shooting 37% from three-point range, 88% from the free throw line. But just based on the averages, he's averaging at least 2 makes. And the numbers tell us that if we get Kon Knueppel to make 2 3-point shots per game, nobody's beating Duke. That hasn't happened all season long yet. Certainly want to see that continue because, again, this Clemson team that Duke will see tomorrow is one of the better 3-point shooting teams in the league. Said it earlier, Chase Hunter has the best percentage of 3-point shooters in the conference this year. Tyrese Proctor is really turning it back on from the outside. We know Isaiah Evans has been incredible from 3-point range. Cooper Flagg has really improved his 3-point shot lately for this Duke basketball team. And so, 3-point line, that's going to be something to look out for in this matchup, along with what both of these teams are able to do in the rebounding department. But in terms of an X factor, each and every game, you got to highlight Cooper Flagg. Nobody's stopping this guy. I don't think that's going to be the case for Clemson as well. Really not the best matchup for them in terms of who's going to guard him. Ian Shefflin, we mentioned he's one of the top rebounders in the ACC and in the country, but I don't know that he's fleet of foot enough to be able to keep up with Cooper Flagg and what he wants to do. And Cooper had the big dunk in the game against Syracuse, but he had just 11 points. I mean, a quiet game for Duke, and they still win by 29. I know that Cooper Flagg is not one that's going to be motivated by individual success in terms of winning the National Player of the Year award. He'd much rather win that national championship for the Duke basketball team. But we want both. We want Coop to be the NPOY, and we also want this Duke team to be the national champions at the end of the year. And Auburn's Janai Broome continues to put together really impressive performances statistically as well. He had a relatively quiet game in the midweek for the Tigers against Oklahoma. They've got a top 10 game this weekend against Florida. So this is a perfect opportunity with a lot of eyeballs watching this game on ESPN to see if Duke basketball can win and Cooper Flagg can play really well against Clemson. And also a big reason for Cooper to play so well tomorrow is because he is the finest of all diaper dandies. And Dick Vitale is going to be on the broadcast for this game. So fired up for it. I've loved having Dickie V on the show previously here with Locked On Blue Devils for the longest of times. He was in our intro. We're going to have to bring that back, getting Dickie V back on the intro for Locked On Blue Devils. It's going to be his first game that he's broadcasting since the 2023 National Championship game. And, of course, it's going to be a Duke game. We need Duke's diaper dandies to play well, to lead the way for Dick Vitale. And I hope we get to hear him say that so often throughout the course of this game. So really excited to see this game tip off and play out tomorrow. Again, a 6:30 p.m. Eastern start for the Blue Devils as they get set to take on Clemson. In a moment, we're going to take a look around Duke athletics. we've got our weekend whip around, and we'll start to wrap up today's episode of Locked On Blue Devils when we return. Locked On Blue Devils here today is brought to you by our friends over at Prize Picks. The big game is almost here, and there's no better way to make it even more exciting than with Prize Picks, the best place for daily fantasy sports. With over 10 million members and billions in winnings awarded, Prize Picks makes it fun and simple to get in on the action. Here's how it works. You pick more or less on at least 2 player projections, and if you're right, you could win up to 1,000 times your cash. Prize Picks even has a free pick for the big game where Patrick Mahomes only needs to throw for 1 yard to win. Pair that with one more correct pick, and you're cashing out. That is so amazing. Check out the promos tab to tell any of the super sweet Millie winners big game lineups. If you tell a lineup that goes 3 for 3, you can win a split of $1 million in promo funds. Download the app today. Use code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONCollege, LOCKEDONCOLLEGE, for $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game, a proud sponsor of Locked On Blue Devils. Time for our weekend whip around. We're talking about everything going on in the life of Duke Athletics. We'll start with women's basketball, who had a very big win last night inside Cameron Indoor Stadium against who? You guessed it. They played Clemson, and Duke won that basketball game by 19 points. Final score in last night's game, Duke 74-55 over Clemson. Duke forced 27 Clemson turnovers, resulting in 35 points for the Blue Devils. What a staple that is of a Carol Lawson coach team, as Chris Edwards, the play-by-play voice for Duke women's basketball, joins us so frequently on the show. He's always talking about the defensive intensity for this Duke basketball team, and that was evident last night in the game against Clemson. Freshman phenom Toby Fournier led the way for the Blue Devils with 20 points on 9 of 12 from the floor. She's so much fun to watch play the game. Ashlyn Jackson, love that last name, had 15 points for Duke, 4 rebounds. Ashlyn's such a sharp-eye shooter from the outside. And then Alicia Okanawa had 14 points and 4 rebounds to help Duke in this basketball game. The Blue Devils now 18-5 overall on the year. They are 9-2 in ACC competition, and they will host the Miami Hurricanes inside Cameron Indoor coming up on Sunday. That's Super Bowl Sunday. Duke softball gets their season started today. They're down in Clearwater, Florida at the Eddie C. Moore Softball Complex. The reigning ACC champion Duke Blue Devils softball team coming off of their first Women's College World Series appearance last season in Oklahoma City. Duke is number 7 in the country to begin the year. This weekend, they will play Penn State, number 24, Mississippi State, number 15, Missouri, number 21, Northwestern, and Kentucky. The next weekend, they continue playing down there in the Sunshine State. They'll be at Florida, playing at the home field of the Florida Gators, playing those Florida Gators and 3 other schools as well. So first few weekends of softball season, you'll see these teams play 4, 5, 6 games on the weekend before they get into ACC competition. And Duke, again, picked number 1 in the ACC coaches poll going into the season. A lot of people expecting the team to have a really good season this year. Duke baseball will be in action to open up the year next weekend at home when they host the Cincinnati Bearcats for 3 games over there. And then also Duke men's lacrosse is back in action tomorrow when they get set to take on Jacksonville. They are at Jacksonville for a road game against the Dolphins. Men's lacrosse won their season opener last weekend, 26-7 over Bellarmine. It's a Duke team that's without Brennan O'Neill, who's the top pick in the pro lacrosse draft. He's an All-American. He was the Twarton winner over the last few years. He's no longer there, but guess what? This Duke team, still really good. Still one of the best teams in the entire country. So excited to see their season continue to play out. Really excited to see this Duke men's basketball game tomorrow when they get set to take on Clemson. And then Duke will play Cal and Stanford, both games at home next weekend for the Blue Devils. We'll have a full week of shows for you next week talking about this game against the Clemson Tigers. Hopefully it's a Duke win. Thank you so much for your support always here within the world of Locked On Blue Devils. Please be sure to subscribe and follow us wherever it is that you get your podcasts. Leave us a 5-star rating and written review, particularly on the Apple Podcast platform. I want to give a shout out to the big RRR who gave us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcast. Said, great pod, love this, thank you. I really do appreciate that. Taylor Gibbon gave us a 5-star review on Apple. Great show. JJ does a great job and has a great guest every episode. I love the Dickie V intro too. Great daily show to listen to. See, a lot of people love that Dickie V intro. I got to bring it back. And then another one from Duke 940-53211. That's easy to say. Go Duke, 5 stars. I love listening to this podcast so much. Keep up the great work. We certainly will do that. Join us and give 5-star reviews on the Apple Podcast platform. Also, make sure that you subscribe to our YouTube channel to watch the show each and every day on YouTube. After this, make sure that you go check out Locked On Sports Today for a look at everything going on in the world of sports. What a crazy NBA trade deadline we have. Next week, we'll look at some of the Duke guys who are on the move and have new teams. All that and so much more coming your way next week on Locked On Blue Devils. But again, Duke and Clemson tomorrow. I'm feeling good about this one. Hopefully, Duke's able to have a 17-game winning streak and be 13-0 when we talk here again on Locked On Blue Devils. That'll do it for today's show. As always, go Duke. I'll talk to you on Monday. My name is JJ Jackson. Thank you and good day.